Welcome back to GraveyardDance.com. Before we tell you the story of Francine Hughes, we want to stress to everyone that we do not condone or condemn her actions all those years ago. We aren't here to judge. Instead, we're only telling an interesting true crime story from the not-too-distant past. Thankfully, though, there are so many more options available to people who are in similar situations. It is a story very close to my heart, as my mother was a victim of domestic abuse as well. If you're in this situation, please reach out to the National Domestic Abuse Hotline. Here's the number for that. Some stories are so powerful that they refuse to be forgotten. Francine Hughes' life was one of those stories. It's the tale of a woman trapped in an abusive marriage, her desperate act of self-defense, and how her courage exposed the harsh realities of domestic violence. Her story resonated so deeply that it inspired a best-selling book and a groundbreaking movie, The Burning Bed, bringing much-needed attention to a crisis many had ignored for far too long. This isn't just about a woman's pain. It's about resilience, justice, and the birth of a movement that demanded change. Francine Hughes was born in 1947 in Stockbridge, Michigan, a small rural town where life moved at a slower pace. She was a shy, bright girl with dreams that mirrored the simplicity of her surroundings: love, family, and stability. Her mother named her Francine after a French musician. Her father, a farm worker, was an abusive alcoholic. Raised in a working-class family, Francine was no stranger to hard work or the traditional expectations placed on women in the 1950s and 60s. Though she grew up in a community where people looked out for one another, the social norms of the time didn't allow for open conversations about family struggles or personal pain. Everything was expected to stay behind closed doors. At just 16, Francine met James "Mickey" Hughes. Mickey was 18, tall and confident, with a charming smile that made Francine feel special. He was a mechanic, skilled with his hands, confident, and outgoing in a way that drew Francine in. But even in those early days, there were small signs of possessiveness and control. Francine, young and in love, didn't recognize them for the red flags they were. Like many teenage girls of her time, she was swept up in the romance and the promise of a happy future. Francine and Mickey married in 1963, and soon after, they welcomed their first child. From the outside, they seemed like any other young couple trying to build a life together. But behind closed doors, the reality was starkly different. Mickey's behavior began to change shortly after their wedding. His once charming demeanor gave way to fits of jealousy and rage. Francine chalked it up to stress. After all, they were young parents with bills to pay and responsibilities to juggle. The verbal abuse came first. Mickey belittled Francine constantly, criticizing her cooking, her looks, and her abilities as a wife. Then came the physical abuse. It started small, a shove here, a slap there, but it escalated quickly. Mickey's temper was explosive, and Francine soon found herself walking on eggshells, trying to avoid his wrath. The neighbors often heard shouting, but in the conservative 1960s, domestic violence wasn't discussed openly. It was seen as a private matter, something to be handled within the family. Francine had nowhere to turn. By the time Francine realized the extent of Mickey's abusive nature, she already had several children. Leaving wasn't an easy option. Mickey controlled every aspect of her life, her money, her movements, and even her relationships with friends and family. Francine tried to leave several times. On one occasion, she moved in with her mother, but Mickey begged her to come back, promising to change. Like many abusers, he was skilled at manipulation, using apologies and declarations of love to keep Francine tethered to him. Throughout the 1970s, Francine endured unimaginable abuse. She had moved out after their divorce was finalized in April 1971, but shortly after, Mickey had gotten into a bad auto accident and she reluctantly allowed him to move back in. She later told the courts that she didn't want to hurt him any more than he had already been, meaning his injuries in the accident. It just goes to show you how sad this case was. No matter what he did to her, she still had the heart to try to help him. Mickey's violent outbursts became more frequent and severe. He would hit her in front of their children, humiliate her publicly, and threaten her if she tried to stand up for herself. In a fit of rage, this guy even snapped and killed his own children's baby kitten. One particularly traumatic incident involved Mickey destroying a dress Francine had bought for herself. He accused her of trying to look good for other men and tore it to shreds. It wasn't just about the dress. It was about control. In 1976, after years of abuse, Francine finally gathered the courage to leave Mickey. She moved into a small house with her children and enrolled in a secretarial program, hoping to gain the skills she needed to support herself. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. But Mickey wasn't ready to let her go. He began stalking her, showing up uninvited, and threatening to hurt her if she didn't take him back. Francine was terrified, but she held her ground. On the night of March 9th, 1977, Mickey came to Francine's house, drunk and angry. He demanded she cook dinner for him, and when she tried, he said it wasn't good enough, and then refused to allow her to cook for her children. He berated her in front of the kids, and the verbal abuse quickly escalated into physical violence, with Mickey hitting and choking Francine. After the beating and choking, he made her burn her textbooks for school so she wouldn't be able to go back. Classy guy, isn't he? For those that can't tell, that was my attempt at sarcasm. The police came and talked to the two individuals, but decided not to arrest Mickey since he had not physically assaulted her in their presence. However, a police officer would later testify that Mickey had threatened her by saying it was all over for her because she had contacted law enforcement. That's how it was in those days. I mean, in some ways, it still kinda is, but as I mentioned, there are a lot more resources now than there was then. Anywho, after forcing her to cook his dinner, he assaulted her in the most despicable ways. We can't say the word here, as certain platforms will demonetize our video, so we'll say a word that rhymes. He violently raped her. That was Francine's final straw. She had had enough. Something inside her snapped. She feared that if she didn't act, Mickey might kill her. She looked at him laying in his bed, exhausted after everything he had done to her. After 13 years of domestic abuse, at their Dansville, Michigan home, in the early hours of March 10th, Francine made a fateful decision. She poured gasoline around the bed where Mickey lay sleeping and lit it on fire. Mickey was killed and the house destroyed in the resulting fire. That had to be one of the worst ways to die, don't you think? She packed up her children, got in the car, and drove straight to the police station. I did it, she told the officers calmly. I set the fire. Francine was charged with first-degree murder, and her case quickly became a national sensation. Her defense team argued that she had acted in a state of temporary insanity caused by years of abuse. The trial marked the first time that battered woman syndrome was introduced as a legal defense in a U.S. courtroom. Psychologists testified about the psychological toll of abuse, explaining how Francine's actions were driven by fear and desperation. In 1977, the jury found Francine not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. The verdict was a turning point, forcing the public and the legal system to confront the realities of domestic violence. Francine's story became a rallying cry for survivors of abuse. It challenged the idea that victims should just leave and highlighted the systemic barriers that keep many trapped in abusive relationships. Author Faith McNulty was so moved by Francine's story that she wrote The Burning Bed, the true story of an abused wife, published in 1980. The book was raw and unflinching, capturing the full scope of Francine's ordeal. In 1984, the book was adapted into a TV movie starring Farrah Fawcett. The film was groundbreaking, bringing the issue of domestic violence into the spotlight. Farrah's portrayal of Francine was haunting, and her performance earned critical acclaim. Francine's courage helped spark a movement. Her story inspired changes in how law enforcement, the legal system, and society as a whole handled domestic violence. In 1980, Francine married Robert Wilson, an aspiring country music singer, and pursued a career as a nurse. She became a licensed practical nurse and was employed at various nursing homes. Following her retirement, she dedicated her time to sitting with elderly individuals and instructing a nursing class. Hughes passed away in Layton, Alabama, on March 22, 2017, due to complications from pneumonia that she had contracted in late 2016. At the time of her death, she was 69 years old. Though Francine never sought fame, her story became a symbol of resilience and the fight for justice. The burning bed remains a powerful reminder of the importance of listening to survivors and supporting those in need. Francine Hughes wasn't just a victim. She was a woman who fought back, and in doing so, changed the world. Her story continues to inspire and educate, proving that even in the darkest moments, there is the potential for change. Hughes established a significant legal precedent with her case, initiating a new movement advocating for the recognition of domestic abuse as a critical issue. As reported by National Public Radio on April 3, 2017, the song Independence Day, penned by Gretchen Peters and popularized by Martina McBride, addresses this incident. Additionally, folk singer Lynn Hardy composed a song titled The Ballad of Francine Hughes that reflects on these events. So, what do you think? Was she justified in her actions? I mean, she did try calling the police, and they didn't even arrest him. Even knowing that he made the threat right there in front of them, they still walked away. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, if you haven't looked, we hope you'll check out our actual website at some point. I mean, we have nearly 300 videos at the moment at the time of this video being released, and new stuff being added there all the time. Subscribing to our Graveyard family would be greatly appreciated. All the social links are on the website down at the bottom of the page. If you have a story you'd like covered, we'd gladly look into it. Just drop it in the comments below as well. Till next time, thanks for watching.